The three biggest mistakes I see street lifters do all the time don't come from a lack of strength. They usually come from messing up different phases of the rep. Most people don't do everything wrong. They do one thing wrong, and that one thing then creates inconsistency, pain, or stalled progress. So I want to go through the most common mistakes that I see face by face and explain what's actually going on and how to fix it. The first mistake or the first issue usually shows up right at the bottom. A lot of street lifters tend to have shoulder pain or discomfort in the bottom hang, especially with wider grip pull-ups or chin-ups. And we can keep things very simple here. Pull-up biases more shoulder internal rotation, and chin-up biases more shoulder external rotation. Internal rotation of the shoulder and external rotation of the shoulder, right? Chin-up puts me more into this externally rotated, and the pull-up more in this internally rotated. This just means if I'm lacking internal rotation at the shoulder, a pull-up might be not the best idea. And if I'm lacking external rotation, a chin-up might not be a great idea. And what this looks like is that the lower ribs, so the lowest ones, our floating ribs, are usually poking out to kind of achieve some expansion in the upper rib cage to get the arm properly overhead. And due to the ribs being slightly flared, the shoulders not being fully opened, the shoulder blade is being pulled back and down and locked into a position where we can't get genuine downward rotation of the scapula as we drive the elbow down and to the sides of the torso. Everything kind of feels stiff, and usually the pull starts with people shrugging the shoulder blades back and down, further limiting the movement of the upper arm and therefore restricting force output. The body strategy in this case is creating stability, but at the cost of the arm not moving properly anymore, and we're not getting the benefits of those bigger muscle groups such as the pecs and lats. Yes, the pecs, they contribute to a pull-up as well. Because if you fix the shoulder blade too early in place, the humerus, so the upper arm, can't move anymore, and under load, this often turns into discomfort and pain. And obviously it also makes sense, right? If I'm lacking overhead mobility and I'm just cheating through my thoracic spine to get the arm overhead, I'm lacking space in the shoulder, and I need to create some space first to actually be able to reach overhead properly. So if you're dealing with pain in chin-ups, then try to improve your shoulder external rotation. If you're dealing with pain in the bottom hang of a pull-up, then you need to improve your shoulder internal rotation. And here is what you can do right away to fix this issue. At the bottom, stop forcing maximal depression. Let your arms hang, make them long. Eventually take a deep and long exhale to get those lower ribs a little bit more down. And for some people, it can help to increase the height of the weight plate instead of in between the feet, in between the knees. This creates some slight hip flexion and should create a nicer position between the rib cage and pelvis. For a lot of people, just allowing for a little bit more freedom already makes the pull-ups feel a lot smoother and a lot less painful. The second mistake happens right after the liftoff. And what you'll see is that people tend to extend and arch their spine, throwing the hips forward whilst keeping the arms almost straight and not bending them at all. This issue usually originates already in the bottom hang. Exactly what we just talked about with issue or problem number one. So usually that means people are stuck in shoulder blade depression. The shoulder blades are being pulled back and down, and they don't allow for proper downward rotation. And as this issue usually originates at the bottom of the movement, it's very likely due to the starting position. The back being flared, heavily extended, or an arched T-spine, right? And if that's the case, then the shoulder blade is usually being pulled back and down into depression, and we cannot get more downward rotation as we drive the arm through shoulder extension, right? That's what pull-up, or at least a narrow grip pull-up or narrow grip chin-up is. Wider grip pull-up, obviously a little bit more adduction, but adduction and shoulder extension, very similar movement if we look at them, right? And yeah, the common cheat here is usually to get access to the lats, right? Because on the initial lift-off of a pull-up, we usually use our pecs and teres until we are at roughly 120 degrees of shoulder flexion. And only then the lats start to kick in properly, right? And that's why you'll see people often just pull away from the bar, arching their back. Oh, now we've got access to the lats, we can now use them properly. And this is just a lack of stacking abilities of the core, so the pelvis and the ribcage and the head, right? Because if I'm flared too much, okay, we're always talking about extremes here, then we're taking away from the sequencing that is important to actually get towards the top. I've already talked about the bottom position influencing the second part of the movement, but those prior movements or those prior phases, they also affect the later phases, right? Because you cannot expect to clean up the movement if the first part of the movement is not going smoothly, right? So if you're already compensating in phase one, how the hell do you want to get towards the bar to the top without compensating? Because you're already in a compensated position. You cannot expect to improve throughout. So that's why the sequencing matters a lot. And that's why all of these issues that we're seeing here are being influenced by each other. And here is how you can fix this immediately. The first fix I would use in this case here, since I said the issue usually starts at the bottom hang. So before we actually get into the bottom hang, I'd stand on a box and ensure I'd get access to my side abs. Why the side abs? Because the side abs, they are attached on the ribcage and the pelvis, and they pull the ribcage and pelvis closer together. Right? We've been talking about the lower ribs being flared. If I pull them down a little bit more, I can assume a better starting position, and as the starting position is improved, we now know that the sequencing up the or through the phases will also be much better, and that's what we are trying to improve here, right? And yeah, this shouldn't be a huge brace, right? So you just want to exhale and find the side abs and then step into the hang, and you don't need to overthink it anymore as much. Because if you think about bracing hard, what you will just do is you will flare your ribs more and create an even bigger issue. And the second cue I would use to improve the lift-off is to think about driving the elbows into the ground and kind of having them more in front instead of driving them out to the side, because if we actually get them in, we create more external rotation at the shoulder. This helps us get the more access to the teres and the pecs, right? And if we are then sequencing these muscles right, we can get more access or better access to the lats and then improve the second phase of this movement here and pull nicely through the mid pattern. And the third mistake shows up at the top. And this is usually a very common one. People tend to chase chin over bar by cranking the neck and the head forward. The shoulders tend to shrug up and finishing with the arms, and the 10 or the very last 10% of the rep look very ugly. And fixing this issue comes down to nailing phase 1 and phase 2, right? If the sequencing from those two phases is off or not as smoothly, we will see compensation towards the top. And one of the biggest issue that I see with this top position issue or top position problem, shoulders being shrugged, is that people tend to see the bar as the end of the movement pattern. What will help you more is to think about pulling through the bar instead of seeing the bar as an end goal, right? And when we think about pulling through the bar, we really want to think about bringing the elbows nicely to the torso, right? Whether we are doing a chin up or a pull-up, it's all about getting the elbows close to the torso, because this is what will help us to really get the max or the most out of the lats and really finish strong in the top position. Because if we cannot finish on top with the lats and the elbows, so the elbow flexors, the brachioradialis, biceps brachii, and so on, then we are very likely to compensate, and that compensation usually shows up by shrugging the shoulders, right? Because if we're engaging the lats properly and driving the elbows nicely to the torso, it's very unlikely that the shoulders are being shrugged up to the ears and the neck being pushed forward, right? Because the lats are some of the biggest shoulder depressors that we have access to, right? Yeah, you want to arrive at the top with control, not in a compensated manner. So most weighted pull-up problems aren't strength issues. They're phase-specific mistakes. Clean up the bottom, the lift-off improves. Clean up the lift-off, and the top stops being ugly. And that's how you build weighted pull-ups that actually progress without beating up your shoulders. That's a wrap for today's video. If you haven't done yet, please help me grow this channel by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and turning the notifications on so you don't miss out on any new video. And if you need help with your own training, then reach out for my one-on-one online coaching. The link is in the description down below, also to my newsletter, the school group, the Street Lifting Academy, and so on. So if you want to get access to my world, all the links are down below. And yeah, that's a wrap for today. See you.